it's interesting, if they hadn't have spoken out to Moses, you have to wonder, would the law have changed? Would that provision have been put in there? Maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have. And I think that's a perfect example of God waiting sometimes for us. We wait on God to move, and I think so many times God is waiting on us to take the initiative. God is waiting on us to be bold and to be courageous and to step forward and to say and to lay our petitions down. Another example, Ruth. Ruth was a foreigner. She was a Moabitess. She wasn't just a foreigner, she was the worst foreigner. I mean, she was basically a Moabitess. I mean, it says, I think, one place in the Old Testament, Moab is God's chamber pot, basically, is what one translation says. Moab was not looked upon kindly. She wasn't just a Gentile, she was the lowest of the low. She left everything. She left everything. Everything that was familiar to her, everything behind in Moab. And I think she felt led by the Spirit, led by God to do it, went with Naomi to start a brand new life in Israel, in Bethlehem. And because she had the boldness to forsake everything that was behind her, everything that was familiar in Moab, God blessed her. Because when she left Moab, she was probably leaving a pretty decent life and going into Israel and was going to be a widow, a foreigner, and live in a state of perpetual poverty at that time. I mean, I'm sure that's what the law was. I mean, they didn't even have rights. They didn't have land. They had to go and glean for what food they had. And if she didn't glean food, they didn't eat. So she left everything. And because she was bold and because she was courageous, she married Boaz. She had Obed. Obed was the grandfather of David, and because of that, she is mentioned by name in the genealogy of Jesus. And if she hadn't have been bold enough to step out, would that have happened?
Is it not Obed who's the father of Jesse?
Obed, she's the grandmother of David.
Yeah, but Obed is the son.
Obed was their son.
Yeah, but Jesse is the son
of Obed. Yeah.
And David is the son of Jesse.
And she's the grandmother of David. She's David's grandmother. Rahab was a harlot in Jericho. And Joshua sent the spies into the land. She hid the spies. She took them in. She saved their lives, and by saving their lives, possibly risked her own. Told them, said, we've heard these stories about your God and about your people. And what is it about that? And because she was willing to step out and go against her country and put her own life and her family's life, not just her life, but her family's life, in possible jeopardy, her life was spared. Because that's in Joshua chapter 2. Then in Joshua 6, verse 17, when they go in and they take Jericho and the walls have come down, Joshua says, kill and destroy everything except for the family of Rahab and the people that are in her house. So every family member of Rahab, she was able to gather in her home and herself were spared. And had she not been brave enough to put her life on the line, God wouldn't have done that. God loves boldness. He wants us to be bold. And to me, that's the difference between Deborah and Baruch. Because she's there. She's judging. She's doing what she's supposed to day in and day out. He's nowhere to be found until she sends for him and then has to go and hold his hand. And not only that, when she tells him that I will go with you, but if I go with you, you're not going to get the glory for the victory. And it doesn't record that he says anything one way or the other, but it's almost like he doesn't even care. He's not only...
This is the problem from the beginning. What you just said came out. Because it says right here is what Ehud did, he died.
Right.
And then after that, evil came in. Here's Barak. He's the general of the army. he is guilty of allowing this evil to come in. He is not only allowing evil, he's a bad leader.
I agree.
And God saw that, and that's when he knew the children were going to cry out, he raised Deborah.
Right.
She's not going to do it conventionally in the gates. She's going to go out underneath the palm trees because that's where God put her.
Exactly.
And the palms are representative of life in Israel.
Now that's cool. I didn't know that.
The palm tree
wow.
is one of the most forty-giving life substances of all the trees in that general region.
And he doesn't even care that he is losing the victory. Now, I don't see, like I said, I'm not an expert, but I do love history, and I love studying generals. And one of my favorite generals to study, just in general, but especially from World War II, is Patton. I don't see General Patton being okay, first of all, I don't see him asking anybody to hold his hand to go out and do what he has to do. He's going to go out and he's going to do it. Second of all, he's not going to be sent for, he's going to be there. Thirdly, I don't see him being okay with saying, okay, if I go and hold your hand, you're going to lose the victory. No, that's that takes away his I would think that would take away your confidence as a commander, as a general. I mean, and that's not, and I mean, I think you can have that confidence in yourself as a general and still be humble and still be in tune with God. Because, you want somebody that's going to be an effective leader. I mean, it's the difference between Barak and David. David was a man that inspired men to want to go out and be with him. I mean, when he was just a kid, he was just a skinny, probably buck-toothed kid, he went out and faced Goliath when nobody else in Israel, including King Saul, who stood head and shoulders above everybody else, and who should have been the one to go out against Goliath, but he didn't because he was too scared. Here comes this skinny, pimply-faced little kid named David. He goes up and says, "Thus saith the Lord, I'm going to do this, 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 and this." He doesn't hesitate. He runs towards Goliath and probably would have killed him sooner if Saul hadn't tried to get him to wear his armor. And he goes out and he does what nobody else is willing to do. And because of that, God gave him the glory and God gave him the victory. And just a few chapters later, wait a minute. Let's see. That was in, I have this written down. So that's 1 Samuel 17, David and Goliath. In the next chapter over, in 1 Samuel 18, you have the women, all these women in Israel praising David because David went from zero to hero overnight. And they're like, "Oh, David has slain his thousands, his tens of, Saul has slain his thousands, and David has slain his tens of thousands." Saul was mad. And why was Saul mad? Because David got the glory for the victory. And that's just a great lesson in life. If you forego the risk, you lay down the rights to that reward. Because Saul wasn't willing to go out and kill Goliath. God took away. He not only took away the glory, he took away his kingdom. He'd already taken away his right as king just a few chapters before that. He lost everything. And that's the difference to me between David and Barak. David would have been out there, and David would probably have been waiting out of respect for the Lord and out of respect for Deborah's relationship with the Lord to hear a word from the Lord. But I don't think Deborah would have had to send for him. I think he would have been there with bells on, ready to go, ready to face. At any minute, she said, "Go attack." "Okay, I'm gone. Bye." I mean, she probably wouldn't have been able to finish the sentence. She would have said, "Thus saith the Lord, do this and this." "Okay, bye, gone, done, over." And then you have this woman, this strange woman, who is kind of sort of related to the people of Israel. I mean, she belongs to the tribe of the people that were the in-laws of Moses. Yael or Jael, and the Lord uses her to take the glory. Because Sisera, in the heat of battle, leaves. Why he does that? Why he leaves his chariot on foot? He had 900 iron chariots. If it had been me, I would have stayed in that chariot, because that is, he lost the battle when he did that. Because nothing was going to be able to defeat those iron chariots. But for whatever reason, the Lord was in it. He left his chariot, went on foot, wandered up to the tent of Jael, said, "I'm thirsty, give me something to drink, give me some water." She's like, "I can do that better. I'll give you some milk. I'll give you some cream." And she probably has a sweet big smile on her face. It's like, "Come on in. You want to rest? Come into my tent and rest. Take it easy. Take your shoes off. Make yourself at home." And wink, wink, she's probably got the hammer and the tent peg behind her back after she sets down the skin of milk. Puts a blanket on him, covers him up. "Oh, you rest, you poor little thing, you rest. You lay here and you rest. You get your strength back." And then while he's resting and sleeping, thinking everything's okay, because here's this sweet, cute little girl, this woman who's taking care of him. She's making sure he's okay. She's going to stand at the tent and she's going to keep watch. And he probably thinks he's safe because he's told her what to do, and she's going to do what he says. And then he just goes to sleep, and never wakes up, because she put a nail in his head. Basically just, pow. That's.
You love this story too much.
I know. Well, I think it's interesting because, some people want to rake her. They rake her and they rake Rahab over the coals. They rake Rahab over the coals because she lied. Even though what she did was saving 2 people's lives. And they want to say, "Well, Jael, this is too violent. This is too bloody. This is too brutal. This, maybe, is this what God really wanted?" Well, guess what? God was bloody, in Joshua, they were commanded to kill everyone and everything. And when Achan took the garments, and he took a wedge of gold, and he took a wedge of silver, and he hid it in his tent, then when they found that out, not only did Achan pay the price, he paid the price, his wife paid the price, his children paid the price, and then they killed his animals, and they burned his possessions. Now, and that is so much more bloody than what she did. And that was a direct command from God to Joshua. And in 1 Samuel 15, when Samuel tells Saul that he's taken the kingdom away from him, why does he do that? Because Saul hasn't killed King Agag of the Amalekites. He's let him live. He's not only let him live, he spared some of the royal family. He also spared the best of their animals. And God said, "Destroy everything." And Samuel has to take the sword, and Samuel has to be the one to kill King Agag. So I don't know. I think compared. He didn't feel it. He didn't wake up. So it's not like she. I don't know.
You gotta remember too, at the beginning here, God had already given. See, Deborah's so anointed.
Yes, she is.
She is so anointed that she goes and tells Barak, "Hasn't the Lord commanded thee?"
Yes.
She's coming out and telling him that he's going to go with his 10,000. It doesn't matter what it is. There's no discrepancy to just go down, and you're going to draw in the army. You're going to be bait for the army, because he's going to pour out a storm, a water deluge.
Yep.
And those chariots are.
That's right, and that's why he gets out of the
chariots
chariot.
are going to get stuck in the mud.
That's why he gets out.
And
of
those
the
chariots are going to be worthless. And God is doing this. And he's going to give victory now, because Barak has declined to go without her. He gets no glory after he would have received it if he obeyed the prophetess. He denied the glory to give it to a woman.
And he doesn't seem to care.
And he doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
No.
And it's interesting because some of the commentaries I looked at, they'll either completely ignore Barak and his negative leadership, or they'll talk about how negative he is. But there was also this discussion that I stumbled upon where it's like, people were saying, he should have been, by rights, he should have been the judge. Like Jeffrey said, he should have been the one that was appointed. And because he didn't step up to the plate, God had to use Deborah instead of him. I don't know if I completely agree with that. I think it's possible God bypassed him altogether, and because knew he was worthless, he wasn't going to do anything, and was just like, I'm not even going to worry with you. I'm just going to take it, kind of like the parable of the talents in the New Testament. I'm going to take your little 1 talent, and I'm going to give it to this woman that has 10, who's worth more than you, and I'm going to raise her up. And because of that, she was used mightily, and some of the other judges, after they have victories and glories, things happen and they go in a downward spiral, because chapter 6, the next judge on the scene is Gideon, and that happens to Gideon in his later years, he's faithful to God when he has to go out and he has to go against the Midianites, but then later on, he turns his back on God and stumbles into idol worship. We don't see that with Deborah. Everything, Deborah's kind of like, the female Daniel. We don't know as much about her as we know about Daniel, but it's all positive. There's not anything negative about her character, about anything she does. Not one thing. And I think, as a woman, she makes me proud I'm a woman. And I think this is proof positive that God can use anybody. If he can call a woman in the Old Testament, under the Mosaic Law, when women in the culture, not necessarily under the law, but just the cultures of that time, women were second-class citizens. Women were chattel. And he can raise her up and use her, and she's not chattel. She's not a second-class citizen. She is bold. She's courageous. She's feminine. She's humble. She's a wife. She's just everything. I don't know. As a Christian woman, she's what I want to be. What I hope I could be. If I could be just a little bit like her, I think that would be awesome.
You are.
Well, I don't know. Not like that. Not like that. Any thoughts?
No, but
any discussion?
You hit it on chapter 5, verse 7. When I looked at that, I knew it, because it says Mother Israel.
Mother in Israel, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying Mother Israel as a term, saying that she's the one that God loved Israel and married Israel. So she actually gets that title, Mother Israel.
Yeah.
Because she is going to birth the nation. She's going to birth the nation that's going to provide the salvation for the world.
Right.
The greatness of Mother Israel is that God is using Mother Israel as his introduction into the world to bring salvation to all men. This is so powerful that there would not been an army on the planet could stand against it. Nothing could ever harm it, because it said there 40 years of peace.
They did.
That's a generation, and 40 in numerics is probation. So God was so pleased.
And you can if you or Jack or Myra knows, you all know more about the Bible than me. Memory serves me correctly, Canaan doesn't ever really, specifically Canaan mentioned, doesn't ever really rise up against Israel again in the book of Judges. This pretty much puts an end to what Canaan, specifically the nation of Canaan, is able to do. He doesn't just freeze them and they're temporarily, abated, and then later on they come back. Like Midian, like the Philistines, like some of the others.
That's what I mean.
They are they are obliterated.
40 years, that's a long time.
And that's a long time. That's a long time in this span of time. Because, 40, 20 years, they'll be okay for a little bit. That's basically the span of a generation. So whatever generation is there when the judge raises up and they turn back to the Lord, that generation is good. But then subsequent generations, because they get, things get good again, they get prosperous, they take advantage.
They soften up
and
they start allowing things.
And aren't you so glad things aren't like that now? We're not like that. We don't do that. We don't cry out to God when we're in trouble and we're in pain. And we're dedicated, like, oh, Lord, I'm going to turn to you. I'm going to fast. I'm going to pray. And our heart's in it. And we do it. And then so many times when he gives us what we want, what do? We turn right around and we go back to what we did before. We do the exact same thing. Only we don't go to high places and worship. We, kneel down before technology. We kneel down before Facebook. We kneel down before food. We kneel down before, TV, money, name it, whatever. I'm just so glad we're not like that. Isn't it nice that we've learned that, that nobody's like that anymore?
Unfortunately, that's not true.
No,
Well, I'm not
all being facetious.
Yes, I'm being very facetious.
Unfortunately, though, there for those that have not been able to see the full understanding of the light, which is Jesus Christ, that has complete power over everybody's lives, and they haven't succumbed. That's what we sing, that surrender all. And I know that's just a word, and then you can speak words and say, yeah, I'm surrendering all, but it doesn't really come to pass until you really know it.
Until
you know it because things start happening. Things change.
It's easy for me to sit in church on a cushioned pew and sing all day and raise my hands about how I'm going to surrender all and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But it's one thing to leave that church and to go out in the world and to actually be willing to do it. That is something that God really speaks into my heart. I've noticed that, especially when I go to my church and we sing a lot of those my other church, and we sing a lot of those traditional songs. I've noticed when we sing Just As I Am, when we sing I Have Decided to Follow Jesus, when we sing I Surrender All, I'll feel the Lord say in my spirit, are you really going to do that? Really? Are you just singing it, or is this an attitude?
Is this you?
Sometimes
Are you
we
really?
worship a pretty song.
Right.
We need to believe what we're saying and believe what we're singing,
and I think sometimes
really
we worship the feeling and the emotion too, because I know that's something that Josh and we've had a lot of discussions about, because he is born and raised Pentecostal. And he's even told me, he said there have been churches that he's gone to, he said, where, he said there were all these showings of faith, but that's all it was. It was a big show. It was about emotion. It was about evoking a feeling. There wasn't anything spiritual behind it. And that's and that happens, with worship, with other things. We just have to, keep God first and foremost. But I didn't know, Myra, if you had anything that you wanted to add about Deborah, since you were the catalyst for us talking about her, any sort of insight you may have had into any of this.
Also, did anyone speak on Tammuz? I know that I missed it because that was the day.
Tammuz.
Did anyone speak on that?
Oh.
The week before last.
So I guess not.
I feel really dumb because I thought, which prophet is Tammuz? I was like, okay.
I don't even know.
And I was thinking prophetesses. I was like, I was like, a prophetess named Tammuz. I don't remember there being a Tammuz. Tammuz is news to me, so I'm just saying.
Wow. Who's rubbed off?
That's true. Well, if that's all I have, guys. But this was fun. I really liked
I
Deborah.
have something to say there.
Good
Okay.
job, thank you.
I have a couple of things that maybe you all might
Okay.
about her. I think there's several things, but one thing, when you read the Song of Deborah, you can find out more details about the war.
Yep.
And one of them was, it rained.
Right.
So that may be the reason they abandoned their,
Yeah.
what did you call them, chariot?
The chariots, the iron chariots.
Render the chariots useless.
Well, and they were iron, and what does iron do when it
It got
rusts?
bogged down in the mud.
And it gets bogged down in the mud, and it's rusty.
The horses couldn't pull them.
Yep.
Yeah, and
That's what,
JL,
it's gonna do the same thing in, that Ezekiel war's coming.
Yep.
It's gonna flood, an earthquake, all that's gonna bog everything down where they can't maneuver, and then he's gonna destroy them. It's God the rain, a lot of rain. He likes rain, you know?
He does. And isn't
He
it interesting?
reigns.
There's a song about that, showers of blessings. I was thinking of that too when you all were talking. I got the idea when you were talking about driving your jump truck. I was thinking, you know, God pours out showers of blessings, and sometimes He just dumps blessings using
Down
dump trucks.
Man,
So maybe that dump truck, maybe that's just going to be a symbol for all the blessings
I
that
was
God's
thinking
going to
of that.
dump down on you.
Man, I was thinking of that too.
Sometimes you gotta wait a while.
Yep.
The dump truck, it can hold a lot.
Well, I wonder how long Deborah had to wait before she was a judge. Because it doesn't tell us how old she is. I don't think she was young. I don't think she was a teenager like Mary was when God
She couldn't
first
have
called
been.
Mary. She couldn't have been.
He had to be at least,
But-
he had to be at least 30.
But I don't know that she was necessarily an older woman either. I don't think she was, like Anna. I think maybe, it's possible she was, 30,
He had to be at least 30.
well, at least, but I mean 30 at least, but not
Okay.
necessarily 60, 70, something like that. I don't know.
You heard why, she had to be 30.
Because to be a judge,
In
right?
Jewish culture, you're not an adult until you're 30.
Even women.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not. So you
They
can't
need
hold any
about
position
15.
of authority until you become an adult at the age of 30, which is when Jesus started his ministry.
Right.
So,
Wasn't that too because of rabbinical law? Because you couldn't be a rabbi until you were 30, right? So, yeah.
anything like that. You're not an adult until you're 30, so you can't hold those kind of positions.
There's a certain amount of wisdom in that.
Good job.
What else do you have, Myra? I'm sorry.
I had learned this some time ago, that there's only two Deborahs in the Bible.
Really?
And the first one was the
The
servant.
The nurse, right?
Of
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
Was it Rebecca?
Yeah, it was Rebecca because didn't she?
Rebecca or Rachel?
I think it was Rebecca because she died because didn't Jacob? Word was sent to Jacob somehow that Rebecca's nurse had died. Somehow he found out about that or something, and I remember hearing that in a lecture one time, and they said that was possibly a way of saying the nurse had died and maybe Rebecca was dead too. They were both dead, so it was kind of like, I don't know. You know,
Well, she was buried under a tree in this specific place in Israel.
Really?
And now we have a second Deborah who's under that same tree where the other Deborah was buried, and she's judging.
That's cool.
She started out, so the legacy of Deborah is first a servant, then a leader.
Right. That's
Isn't
true.
that cool?
Yeah, that's very cool.
Also, I looked up the name Prophetess in the Strongs just out of curiosity.
Uh-huh.
And in all the other places where a prophetess is mentioned, not her, not Deborah, but all the other ones,
Uh-huh.
it has the word H-A-N before the word Navi, which is prophet. So it's the root word Navi, N-A-V-I, means prophet. For female, they add A-H at the end of it for
Right.
a female prophet.
Right.
But all the other ones, they have a what do you call it?
Prefix.
Yeah, a prefix, H-A-N, and I looked it up, and H-A-N means grace. So Deborah did not have that. She didn't have the grace, or in what I feel like is the spiritual gift, but actually it means if you look deeper in Hebrew, it means they were part of the dynasty. So Miriam was a prophetess as part of the dynasty of
So maybe
Moses,
she was in the
Aaron,
family.
Miriam. They were. Huldah also was in the dynasty. Noadiah, who's a false prophetess, we'll look at later, she was in the dynasty, kind of like Jezebel was in dynasty. But this one was not.
So she
Deborah
wasn't.
was not in a dynasty.
So she didn't have. So she did have visions, and she did, and she.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. But my point was this, is that she was more of a government official.
Right.
And so it was more like a calling on her life. It
Yeah.
was not as much you're graced with a prophetess gift, like can enter the gift of prophecy.
Right.
In the New Testament, with the gift of prophecy, the spirit of prophecy in Revelation. But she was different because, like you said, she was a government official. She was called into a position. And so, even though she operated in the gift of prophecy, she was not in a dynasty. Like, we don't think of the family of Moses as being a dynasty. We don't
No.
think of them as being kings because they weren't specifically called kings.
They're the priestly line.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
you
yes.
know, so
But anyway, she was like, this is what I'm thinking about her too, is because the day they were so oppressed. Remember how Gideon was so oppressed he had to hide in the wine press?
yeah, that's
This
where
same
it was.
thing was going on right here.
Right.
They were oppressed by Canaan, which was a great observation. Because I looked back and the previous judge was raised up from Moab, and this one from Canaan, and the next one from Midian. So you're right. That was a great observation you made about the different enemies. But the men were downcast.
Right.
They were downcast. And so it made an opportunity for a woman, really.
It did.
Sometimes God has to create opportunities for women. They can't just walk in and take the place that a man is typically going to serve in unless there is a special door open for her.
Right.
That's true. That's even true today. And today we're in that place in America.
Right.
Where the women are stepping up because men are discouraged. I mean, it's happened over the last 50 years. Was not true of our culture 50 years ago. But in the last 50 years, men have just become discouraged. And you can study this for weeks if you wanted to.
Or
on the
months or
internet.
years.
Looking into the men, the state of husbands and men place in culture in America and stuff like that. Men are downcast today too.
Wow.
And women are stepping up.
Women have been stepping up for a long time because I got to tell you, when I was doing this study, I kind of reject